Next big thing was the pandemic. This was once you'd become the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and you have this pandemic begin to roll in. I was looking at the way you describe that situation in late 2019, early 2020 in your book, and it appears that you had no idea of the severity of this virus that was rolling into the shores. When was the first time you heard that there was a virus that had come in from China?
Whatever the date was, I think it was either end of 2019, beginning of 2020. I can't remember exactly when, but there's a day when I'm walking through the lobby of the House of Commons with the Health Secretary, and he says, I'm worried about this Chinese virus.
Was Matt Hancock the right person to be handling that? Because that is a generational, once in a lifetime health issue.
Yeah.
And in hindsight,
I think he did a very good job. Yes, I think he was very energetic.
Was he the best person to be handling it?
I think he did a very good job, and I think that
was he the best person to be handling it?
Look,
in hindsight,
I certainly think that yes, because I think that he had the right mixture of energy and realism. Don't forget, we didn't know about the disease. We didn't know how lethal it was. We didn't know how contagious it was. And we didn't know exactly how it was transmitted. There was a lot of stuff we didn't know.
Some quotes from your book here. You said, the problem wasn't that I was ignorant to zoonotic diseases. The problem was that I felt I knew all about them. After more than 30 years of writing about or dealing with new zoonotic diseases, I felt I knew my SARS and my Ebola, so to speak. And I concluded two things. First, that these novel zoonotic plagues tend to sort themselves out. And second, that the greater risk of destruction from attempts to stop them by politicians was their sort of attempts to contain the diseases, that the prevention would probably be worse than the cause in some respects. So when Matt Hancock started talking about a new coronavirus, possibly from bats and the risk that it would sweep the country, it was hardly surprising that I felt I'd heard this all before. Little did we know.
Yes, I think that's. I'm being very honest there about as I am throughout Unleashed, about my state of mind, because I'd covered in great detail the salmonella and eggs panic when millions of chickens were slaughtered needlessly. I'd covered the bovine spongiform encephalopathy panic, mad cow disease, when a vast proportion of the UK dairy cattle herd was slaughtered, probably needlessly. The livelihoods of farmers were destroyed. I'd been mayor of London when we were threatened with a bird flu.
So you didn't think it was a big deal?
And we'd laid on stocks of Tamiflu, which turned out not to be necessary. So I'd seen SARS come and go, Ebola and so on. And in each of these cases, what seemed to have happened was that there'd been a rational anxiety about the risk of a zoonotic disease, often from Asia or wherever. We would get we'd do our best to get ready, and then it mysteriously leave us almost completely unaffected. I remember the swine flu.
Is that what you thought was going to happen in this case?
And I didn't know.
Yeah.
Of course I didn't know. What I was trying to do was to give you
context,
the context and the state of mind that I think a lot of people were in when they heard about COVID.
When did you call China? February 2020, there was a call you made to the leader of China.
To Xi Jinping?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have called him. It'll be in the book.
And you were sending supplies.
Yeah, that stage, we were still sending
supplies to help them.
We were sending protective.
What did he say about the virus?
Well, I said, look, my memory of the conversation is hazy now, but I think I congratulated him on what seemed to be his efforts to control the disease, but said I was anxious about what was happening in these wet markets, because at that stage we were given to understand that the disease had occurred spontaneously in a market in Wuhan.
What did he say?
And I can't remember what he said to that. I don't think. Look, I mean, he was a president of China. I don't think he wanted particularly the implication that China was in any way at fault, and I can totally understand that. But I now think that probably wasn't right. I now think that almost certainly it was a lab accident, or it was as a result of something that went wrong in that lab.
Can I ask about this? Because this started as a conspiracy theory that is now widely accepted as the probable likely outcome. Why were they messing around with a virus in a lab in Wuhan?
Well, you may well ask. I mean, I think they were.
Why do you think they were? As someone that is so far away from why people do such a thing.
I genuinely don't know, but I think that they were, science, the point of science is to keep pushing back the frontiers of human knowledge everywhere and to see what they could do.
Do you think it was a weapon?
I didn't have any reason to think so. I think it was a terrible accident. I think the thing escaped from the lab. I think they were looking at engineering these viruses, just looking at function gain of the virus and ways that they could manipulate it. And sadly, something went wrong. That's my best guess, and a lot of people now seem to think that.
You called Trump around this time as well to speak to him about it?
I did. Yes.
What did he think?
Well, I mean, he took the firm view that, China had a case to answer, but so did a lot of people.
And in the book, you talk about the World Health Organization's response being seemingly hesitant because they wanted to keep Beijing in favor.
Yes, I think a lot of scientists were anxious about cheesing off the Chinese. And I think a lot of scientists, because China is very heavily involved in the support and sponsorship of a lot of academic research and so on. So there was a sort of hesitance. I felt, I mean, I might have been wrong about this. My impression was there was a sort of gingerliness about seeming to finger the Chinese too much.
On lockdowns, it's interesting that I was reading in your book that around the 8th of March, you start to see what's going on in Italy. And I think we can all vividly remember those scenes from those Italian hospitals where there was patients in the corridors being pushed around on trolleys and there was not enough beds. And I think for me as well, that was one of the big moments where I realized, watching it actually play out on Twitter, that this was an incredibly serious situation, something that I'd never seen in my lifetime before. Was that the penny drop moment for you, that this wasn't just another bird flu? Or
I was very anxious about it because I knew the Italian healthcare system. I thought it was broadly excellent, and I remember when one of our kids had fell into a swimming pool in Italy once. When everybody was having a lie-in, it's about the most shattering thing that could ever happen to you, and the Italian pronto soccorso came. And they were unbelievably good. They were so fast. They were so. And I thought, if the Italians are having problems with this thing, and frankly, our population is about as elderly as theirs, then this could be very, very serious. So I think that did really register with me. And so if you look at obviously I defer completely to the inquiry into all this under Dame Heather Hallett. But if you look at what happened from then on in, you see a series through March. Up till the 23rd of March, you see a series of intensifying steps to try to get people to take precautions.
What I observed, I saw that in the book, and you kind of have the stages that you break down that you went through from that moment onwards. What I observed, though, and I think this is probably a fair estimation or a fair description of what happened, was there was indecision. Because it seemed like there was facts coming from one ear, facts coming from the other ear, and there was almost a bit of paralysis. And when you look at the rest of the European numbers, which I was looking through yesterday, about when different sort of European markets made that decision, the UK appears to make the decision to lock down much slower than all the other European nations, slower to close the schools, the shops, and events seem to be later than our European counterparts. And Matt Hancock went on to say that
don't forget they were ahead of us in the epicurve anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So they were. So you mentioned the Italian situation,
yeah,
and they were already ahead of us, and we could see that we were going to have to bring in measures, but again, this will be for the inquiry to comment upon, but it's pretty clear to me that we couldn't reasonably have instituted these measures in the UK, which were novel and draconian, in advance of the scientific advice or opinion.
But
that's what it would have been.
Them being ahead of us isn't relevant, because the chart I have here shows how many days it took us to take decisive action after the third death. And it shows that for all of the European nations. And when I was reading about the information you were getting from scientists on this end and from other people in politics, it was so contradictory that I think I was guessing that that's what caused the indecision, and also your own sort of philosophy towards shutting down society.
We had this group called the Scientific Advisory Group on Emergencies, right? The SAGE. And they were, so we were going to be led by the science. And we basically I decided that we had to follow what SAGE advised. And for a long time, to your point, they hesitated about schools because of all the disbenefits. And if you remember, the argument was that if you went too early, then there was a risk that you'd have to keep doing it. Because the public would lose patience with the lockdown, and there was a secondary argument which was there would then be bounce back. If you went too early and you kept on for you'd then take the measures off, and the virus would flare up again, which indeed did happen throughout the course of the pandemic. So there were. The scientific advice was, it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was particularly confused at that stage. I think it was, they were struggling to assess exactly what to do. And there were different views within the scientists about certain things like.
Matt Hancock said that we could have saved 30,000 lives.
Like masks and so on.
Is that true? Matt Hancock said, if we'd locked down earlier.
I can't say that for sure. I've no way of knowing that. But what I can say is that to have locked down earlier would have been to have gone beyond, to have anticipated scientific advice. It would not have been something. And I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not a scientist. I was being asked to, what was on the agenda was imprisoning the whole UK population. It wasn't something the scientists were yet recommending.
In the book, you seem to question whether those lockdowns really even worked.
So I'm not saying that. What I'm saying, so depends what you mean by work. I think that they certainly did have a role in stopping the spread of the disease, and they helped probably to turn down the curve of the disease. Probably, almost certainly. What I find very difficult to gauge now, and again, this is for Heather Hallett, is to what extent was it the lockdowns what did it, and to what extent was this going to happen naturally as a result of the natural parabola.
And you suspect it was going to happen anyway.
What I'm saying is that to some extent, or to a large extent, it was perhaps going to happen anyway, perhaps. And given that it was perhaps, or it was to a large extent perhaps going to happen anyway, the question is, did the benefits of lockdown outweigh the very, very severe damage done to kids' life chances at school, which you talked about earlier?
What do you think the answer to that question is?
I think that we did the right thing.
You think we did the right thing?
I think we did the right thing. But I'm conscious that there are lots of people who disagree. And what I hope is that the COVID inquiry will say that, yes, we did do the right thing.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.